Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 131 of the longest tenure Denver Nuggets spin-off podcast in the world. Welcome to the DNVR Nuggets' Serbian Corner. My name is Miroslav, and before we begin, please let me remind you to like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the DNVR Sports YouTube channel and DNVR Nuggets podcast channel. The audio version is perfect for your commute or to make your office/home office time more bearable. If you want to support the show more directly, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/MiroslavCuk, just like my Seco tier supporters, Peter Plummer and Daniel Lynch. Let's talk quickly about the two games from last week before I bring in my guests for today. First, the Charlotte game. I hated this game. 14 and 39 Hornets played on a second night of a back-to-back without 7 of their guys. And I announced on Twitter that game as them forfeiting it, but not because I thought there was no chance the Nuggets could drop that game, but because I was getting ready to roast them if they would drop it. The Nuggets shot 47 threes, which means they were wide open on many of them, but they didn't look for the best possible shot like they usually do. Joker made 4 3-point attempts in the first 3 minutes of the game, which is what my nightmares look like. He did hit a 6 of 14 at the end, but that was not Nuggets basketball. Jamal attempted 10 threes and made 7 of those, so kudos to him. The defense was bad, but I honestly didn't expect a much better effort against the zombie Hornets. AG was great, and MPJ couldn't hit a shot to save his life. A 9th straight win, so what the hell was I complaining about? Well, here's what. The Lakers game. Luka shot 5 of 18 in the previous Lakers game, so of course he was on fire against the Nuggets. That's a weird first note, considering it was the Lakers defense that decided this game. The LA team came into this game with a clear decision to play hard and physically and get away with a lot of contact, which is normal for every basketball team playing physically, but more so for the Lakers. We know what happens in these kinds of games. Mike turns into a pumpkin, and Jokic plays the default way, finding guys who are wide open and breaking shots, so the Nuggets' game plan turned into dust. The Lakers closed the paint, forcing the Nuggets to hit outside shots, and even though the home team made 39% of their threes on a pretty big volume, that is not the way this team is wired to play. Joker had one of his least impressive triple-doubles, making just 2 field goals in 7 attempts. Jamal was shooting well again, but had 0 made shots inside the arc. Aaron played well on offense. CB and Mike were non-factors. Russ was too eager to shot. And Julian had 5 fouls in the first 3 minutes of game time. He might as well had a big bullseye on his jersey in this game. The Nuggets scored only 100 points, and you know their defense is not good enough to win in such an offensive output. Okay, that is enough of an intro for this show. It is time to bring my guests in. First, she is one of the smartest people in the Nuggetsverse, a host of a delightful podcast called What's in the Game, next to our buddy Will. It's Grace Jean. Welcome back, Grace.
Hi, Miroslav. Thank you for having me on this delightful Sunday.
Yes, so I did see on Twitter that you weren't watching the Lakers game live, but you also, being a sicko like I am, did not take that game away from you. You actually watched the game before going to sleep last night, right?
Yeah, I watched the possession by possession. Normally, I do watch a full game before I, if I miss it live. But I was on vacation and just trying to get enough sleep before I had to, get on a plane to get back home from said vacation. But yeah, I did subject myself to that. And it's interesting because I actually did watch most of the first quarter live. Going through the possession by possession version, it was just a repeat of everything I saw in that first stint of the first quarter, just all over again. Like that was just the story of the game.
Yeah, as Adam Mares would say, the first note
Yeah.
describes the game really well.
Yeah, very.
Okay, last but not least, his weekly column is one of the main reasons you should definitely become a diehard on the DNVR.com. I've been following his work for a decade now, and you should too. It's my friend and one of the people I can thank for being in this seat today. It's Mike Olson. Welcome back to the show, Mike.
That is a nice intro. My goodness, nothing about trombones or acapella or anything, Miro. I don't.
Yeah.
Very kind of you.
I'm saving that part for the Patreon only part of the show. I need to figure out how to make an award for all my Patreons by giving them some extra content. I'll have to think about it later. So, Mike, you watched game against Charlotte live.
Was there
in the arena?
Yeah.
And it was a game with so many threes attempted, and it was pretty similar versus the Lakers too, right?
It was. I actually, I think you said it really well. A couple of the notes that I'd had out of the game. It was really weird how many threes we were taking. They were just leaving them open to us, but they still didn't seem like the best shots, and we weren't hitting them. Man, Mike had a rough game that night and did not do any better last night. I had seen Grace's note that she wasn't going to get to watch the game live, and about halfway through, I was pretty jealous, actually, that had been true. So, they never figured it out last night. And Charlotte, frankly, they should have just torn them apart, and it wasn't really decided until late in the game. That was not really the most impressive effort either.
No, by the way, I'm the one during the regular season. I watch most of the games not live, but like several hours later, which means I already know the result, which is good and bad at the same time. Like, it's bad because I don't have the thrill of a live game, but at the same time, it's good because I can get proper medication before I start watching the game. So I prepare myself for what's going to happen in the following hour and a half, which is, by the way, a great thing. Like, I can rewatch a game in an hour and not lose 2.5 hours, watching again, medication ads and car dealership ads as well. Okay, so I want to start this show by saying that this could have been a completely different show had the Nuggets won the game last night. It would have been their 10-game win streak, the first 10-game win streak of the Jokic era. Alas, we witnessed a game that looked like a lot of games versus a good opponent this season. We will talk about the game later, of course, but before we do, I want to go back to how this season started. We had reports of dissonance between Michael Malone and Calvin Booth that is now almost 2 seasons long. Calvin was mad at Malone for not giving more opportunities to the boys he drafted last season, so he honestly gave a raw deal to Malone this season by removing KCP and Justin Holiday from the team, and the only veteran addition was upgrading Reggie Jackson to Russell Westbrook. This forced Malone's hand into playing P. Watt, Julian, and Tyson for a lot of minutes this season. Malone's response, of course, was overplaying Strother, who is his guy, and I don't think I'm reaching when I say that. And the result of that extended chance was the game we saw from him versus the Lakers. He wasn't ready for it. Calvin Booth thinks we have 7 starters and a big drop-off after that. And Michael Malone thinks we have 6 starters, and I'm not sure what he thinks about the other guys. So, Grace, I'm going to let you cook on the composition of this Nuggets roster. 57 games into the season. And by the way, this is the final version of the Nuggets we're going to get for these playoffs.
Well, like you said, Miroslav, the roster is what it is. I think there was a tweet that I sent out sometime in November when they were really going through an extended struggle, just like losing to bad teams, losing to mid teams, and like eking out wins here and there. That, everyone at that point is talking about what's going to happen at the trade deadline. I think this was even before any of the MPJ rumors, MPJ being traded for Zach LaVine rumors were out. I said, hey, like, nothing is going to save them at the trade deadline. When I said that, I didn't think that they would literally do nothing at the trade deadline. So like I want to start from there and just like what it means for the rotation, because first of all, I actually don't remember if you did a show following Calvin Booth's post trade deadline impromptu press conference, wherein he puts a lot of emphasis on like they were trying to do certain things and nothing really came through. And one of the things he said was like, we need a backup big. He simultaneously talks about how they weren't planning on making any changes to or additions to the main rotation, like the 8+ guys or that like play every night, but also really went in on the fact that he doesn't think that Julian is ready for the playoffs. So I'm like, okay, so who are the guys that you had in your list that was like, nope, that's not even something we're focusing on, but also this is a problem. And then of course we have the situation where, like you said, Miroslav, we have all these young guys and no vets coming off the bench outside of Russ, really. And before the All-Star break, but after the trade deadline, we started to get some useful minutes from guys like Zeke and Pickett against bad teams, which is like, hey, help us win any kinds of games that we can, because frankly we were losing games against bad teams earlier in the year. So we'll take the help anywhere we can get it. And that was in part because guys were injured, right? Peyton out, Russ out, AG out for one or two of those games, Mike out with the hamstring. In terms of assessing where the roster is relative to where I was hoping even this kind of iteration of the team could be going into the playoffs, I think that Adam Mares actually said it best before the season even started, that this version of the team was going to be maybe the most volatile that we've seen in the Jokic era in terms of the floor versus the ceiling. And it's interesting because, like I said, they were struggling at the beginning of the year with losing to bad teams, but just kind of started taking care of business, especially leading up to the All-Star break. But we saw that again last night, right? Like, this is a team that can simultaneously like win or score over 130 points more times in this season than they have since I've been watching the team. But also has nights like this where like nothing can get going, and obviously the defense hasn't shown up really in any major way this whole season. And when you get a game like that against a decent team, you get that game against the Lakers. And so it's scary. It kind of makes you think, like, if you've got a high ceiling and a low floor, like, you can beat anyone and you can be beaten by anyone. And I think that's going to apply for the most part in the playoffs too. I do think that they have a certain floor, and hopefully I'm not proven wrong about that in the playoffs in a series, just having Jokic and, a team that can figure out problems when they have time to do so, but they can also get pounced on like they did last night.
So I couldn't agree more on all the points. But Mike, you've been following the Nuggets for so long and very deeply during this Joker run. How do you feel about the lengths of which the Nuggets are capable of going this season with the roster composed like it is right now?
My favorite thing about what Grace just said in talking about the ceiling and the floor is that we have seen both of them this year. And the crazy part to me about this team, and this has been true of the Nuggets for a long time, but I don't know if ever more so to me, at least than this season, is they travel as a pack. I mean, they all go up together. They all go down together. I sure would love to see a few games where it felt like you could ride the hot guys while the rest weren't performing as well. But our average as a team doesn't feel too far off from where it's always felt. It just feels like those swings. We're a little bipolar this year. Basically, we've got some really strong moments, even defensively. You see us back on that string, playing the way we used to, and I think there's some real promise to that. But I don't think we can just switch it on and off. And you have a game, I can't remember last night, we started 0 for 6, 0 for 7. You watch the ever-standing crowd until the first score finally just sit down because they're tired. And we haven't put the ball in the basket yet. And we kept it for a lot of the rest of the game to within 10 points or so, but they just kept squeezing us and throwing things at us that we weren't ready for, we weren't prepared for, and we played as a team poorly last night. I mean, I can't remember who on the DNVR podcast said it last night, but my Joker's least impressive triple-double last night. Just the whole team was not on point, and never got there, never turned it around and found it.
And to be fair, the Lakers too missed 6 of their first 7 shots as well. It was a horrible start to the game from both sides. But you kind of expect that from the Lakers. They're a new team right now. They need to figure some stuff out. The Nuggets seem like a different squad since they came back from the break. Like they just are not capable of pushing the envelope just now. But we'll see. We'll see what the future gives to us. Let's take one short break, and then I want to talk a bit about Michael Malone. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. So, Mike, what grade would you give Michael Malone for his work this season?
I'm a huge Moch fan, so let's start with where I typically sit on these topics. I'd give him a real solid B this year. There's definitely been some times I think that either we've not figured out what's being thrown at us, or he has not found a way to inspire the team. But I do think just that list that Grace gave a little bit ago with everybody who's been on and off the court this year, we have not been a solid first 5 for a better part of the year. I think that he's done a good job of figuring out how to still keep us within shooting distance of the 2nd or 3rd seed in the midst of all of that turnover, frankly.
What do you think, Grace?
Yeah, we're in agreement here. I think I'd probably lean more in like the B-, B if I'm being generous. But I do think one of the things that I come to appreciate when I watch other basketball teams is all the things that there are still to appreciate about this Nugget squad. For example, you're watching other teams and their crunch time offense, and you're like, what are they even trying to do? Like, that's one of my kind of go-tos when I watch, other teams. But another one is how difficult it can be to keep a squad emotionally together through tumultuous times, especially one on a team that has high expectations. Now, I'm going to hold Malone to a much higher standard than Bud Budenholzer, for example. But, him and, Nick Nurse, who I know is a favorite of some people for the tactical stuff. But when it comes to the interpersonal and like keeping guys, we say that he struggles to keep guys motivated and engaged, particularly on the defensive end. But this team does play together better than like most teams, and that is the reason why we are still within, spitting distance of the 2 seed still, even now after that loss last night. But we're a top seed, right? Like at the beginning of the season, when articles were coming out about the discord between Malone and Booth, the team was like below 500, I think, when that article came out. It was after that loss to the Timberwolves, and they were 2-3 after, or maybe like 3-4 actually, after some early losses and some overtime wins. It was really rough, and you're looking at the standings and wondering like, where is this team even going to finish? The Western Conference has definitely softened in some areas, and that's definitely helped. But then you look now, and again, every team in the top 10 is over 500, and you can't say that obviously about the other conference. But to be able to keep a team together and engaged and playing well enough, at least on offense, that they can climb up to maybe even more impressively so well on offense so they can make up for whatever the defense has been this season. I think that is important. There have been moments of, I think, brilliance, both tactically and everyone likes to talk about the like managing rotations aspect of it. And there have been other times where I'm like, that stuff is there's much left to be desired on that end. But I also recognize the task in front of him even when everybody is healthy, right? I didn't necessarily expect them to lose that game at all, let alone in the fashion that they did. But I'm not surprised that they're struggling coming out of the All-Star break. Mike in particular, I didn't expect to look this rough, but he was coming off of a hamstring injury that he had leading up to the break. Russ, literally the same injury. And his addition to the rotation adds, just a completely different dynamic. So, this team has been like 6 or 7 different teams throughout the season. And it's not just based on the personnel who's on the floor. At the beginning, everybody was healthy and didn't know how to play together. Like, that was evident. And then they started to learn things, and then guys get injured. And then it's the job of the coach to try to figure out rotations and keeping everybody together and optimizing things. And some things have been optimized and other things haven't. So that was a lot to say to say that I agree with a B to a B minus, but I don't think you can reasonably go lower than that if you're grading on a curve, even of the good teams in the NBA.
Yeah, this team is weird because I feel like their best games this season came in games where they've been missing a guy or two for some reason. Like, I always come back to the Thunder game. The Nuggets won without Jamal. Now, granted, that was the part of season when Jamal was really struggling, so it made sense that they picked up the tempo at that point and won a big game over there. But this win streak came with a bunch of guys missing, granted against bad teams, but still. But on Malone's part, I read a nice article about Greg Popovich, how he is one of the rare coaches who is great at building up his guys, but also making the final push when your team is good enough and win it all. Michael Malone has done that on the Nuggets. Granted, he's been here for 10 seasons now, so he's got the opportunity to do both things, build up the team and win the championship 2 years ago. I think here's the deal. My biggest reservation with Michael Malone through all these years was him not being very flexible as a coach in game adjustments, and I think this was actually his best season so far in that regard. I think he was experimenting with lineups much more than in any other season. Now, maybe that's because he has fewer guys to play with, so he has to do it, but still, he did it well. I agree with both of you about him not being able to keep his team on the tip of their toes in many games this season, and I think that's because he's a people's coach. Like, guys like Joker and Jamal and Aaron love Michael because he loves them back, but then also he cannot scream at them, I guess, to make them play harder when they don't feel like.
Or will screaming at them even get them to play harder at this point?
Yeah,
right?
that's also true. So I'm not sure. I can only give him like 2 different grades, and I cannot like compute them together. Like, I think he's had like an A minus season in coaching in the actual games, but I think he doesn't have the authority over his biggest superstars to make them play well in the regular season. That doesn't mean he won't be able to do it in the playoffs. I actually think he will, because everybody will be understanding how important the moment is. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating.
You have to wonder, after 10 seasons with anyone, I mean, Pop is a pretty special circumstance, right? There's a very few coaches in the league who have this kind of tenure. 3,000, 3,500 plus days later, how many times can you go back to the well, whether it's screaming or kindness or whatever your mechanism is? How long does that keep working before people are like, I have heard you do that before? So yeah, it's just, he's been there a long time. It's harder to motivate folks after that.
I will say, just as a little plug here, after reading Mike Singer's book, biography on Jokic, I do not think that there is a coach on earth, frankly, who can make him want to play harder when he doesn't want to.
Well said.
Yeah, thank God he's usually ready to play hard on the offensive end every night. And yeah. Well, I honestly can't blame him for some of his defensive duds this season, because when you see your guys not giving their best and you're supposed to generate like 70 points this night, like, come on, guys, give me a break on the other side. It's actually pretty crazy, because I believe Trae Young is a guy who's been generating by far the most points, plus points from assists in this league, because he even led the league in total points and assists a couple of times already. And now Joker is the guy doing that. So he's not only assisting as much, he's also scoring. That's crazy this season. Although since New Year, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I would bet he's not scoring more than like 25 points per game since New Year, since the other guys on the team started playing better and spreading the wealth a bit more.
I do think that Joker's defensive acumen, as good as it's gotten, really depends on how much the guards in front of him are getting blown by, and when they are not, when they look like they're on roller skates and they're not covering those first guys coming by pretty well, he's often stuck out on an island that way, and that's been true a lot of this season.
One of the things he said in a post game last year, I don't remember which game it was, but it was one of KCP's really great defensive games, and he was getting questions about how good his own defense was, Jokic was, and he basically said, it might have been an answer to a question from Matt Moore, actually, how when other guys are like playing really hard, you play really hard too, because like you want that possession to end up a success, because you want how hard the guy in front of you was working to be rewarded in that sense. And I haven't really gotten that sentiment hasn't come across on the court quite as much this season as it did last year. So that's been tough, but undoubtedly, I think everybody on the team has taken a hit defensively, except for Peyton Watson, who was unfortunately out for that game last night. I actually think they missed him a lot in that matchup. If you'll recall, the first game that we played against the Lakers this year, we were without Aaron Gordon, and it was Peyton Watson who was out there guarding LeBron. So I know there were some comments about how, well, we have to have AG for Luka. So we don't have we can't guard both LeBron and Luka and all that. Obviously, that team didn't have Luka before, but we didn't have AG at all in that first game. So, and I do think that he has been the most involved in my favorite of the very few defensive oriented wins this season. So it's definitely hurt not to have him, and I think it's going to hurt them even more in this stretch as they're facing some steeper competition for sure.
Yeah, Peyton got injured in a really, really bad moment in the season. It's never good news when you get an injury, but this is really a bad part of the season because of his ramping up before the playoffs, and hopefully he'll have enough games to do it. One other thing about the Lakers game, but we need to take a break before we do that. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so the Lakers gave a good solve for the Nuggets last night, and that solve is put 3 guys on Joker and make everybody else beat you because there's not a lot of shooting around him, so they probably won't hit a lot of wide open shots. I thought Joker had a weird game, regardless of that, because he didn't try to do something else but trying to push himself into the 3 guys and then find an open guy. I thought he was probably supposed to be more on the top of the key and try to direct traffic from there and, shoot some threes. Like, he only had 1 3-point attempted out of 45, 47 the Nuggets had. He wasn't one of the chuckers last night, although nobody was really chucking. The percentage was pretty good. Still, only like 20-something points in the paint. That's not what the Nuggets are supposed to do this season, considering how much shooting they normally have. So, Grace, do you think last night's game was similar to many other losses to good teams this season, or was the Lakers' game plan something very different to the other ones?
So I think in terms of their game plan, I think they're different. Good defenses have employed different game plans against Jokic. Now, to be clear, he has missed quite a number of the games that we've had against the top defenses, with the exception of the games against OKC, the Clippers. I know he missed the Rockets game. For example, the Orlando Magic, he definitely played in, and I felt like he was going through everybody like water. I went to one of those games in person, and it was actually quite fun because that was a game where it felt like everybody was having fun and playing hard, really. I thought the in terms of the game script, it was very different than the losses to other good teams, because most of the time, it'll look really bad and everyone's complaining about the offense, like when it's a blowout loss, say 15 plus point difference or higher. But then you go at the end of the game and the offensive rating is like over 120, but we had given up like a 140 defensive rating. Last night was a little bit different. Even though the Lakers definitely scored a lot of points, but they were relatively inefficient until like the very, very end of the game. And it really was more about shutting the Nuggets down. And that really hadn't happened in that manner since the beginning of the season, in those first 2 games of the season against OKC and the Clippers. Whereas for the most part, throughout the whole rest of the season, even in losses, I've felt like the offense has had a certain floor to it, even against these really good defenses. But the problem has been on the other end. Now, don't get me wrong. They were not good defensively last night either. But in terms of the game plan, I mean, it's not really like the general idea to pack the paint and try to force the Nuggets to shoot threes is not really new. The difference I feel like in the games where they've been more successful is that they are able to counter that in ways that don't require them to shoot 41 threes like they did last night. Often with, as you suggest, Miroslav, they have Jokic kind of posting himself up, not necessarily in the post, but kind of hanging out further away from the basket, not necessarily even at the top of the key, but maybe he's posting up from further out and creating more open cutting lanes for, Christian, MPJ, Russ, etc. And there were even a few plays last night where they do that, but then he'd go back to like trying to get as deep into the paint as possible at the beginning of the possession. That's something that's very different about the Nuggets, especially this season and last season, compared to some other teams that have a more extensive like drive and kick game is we don't really believe in like extending an advantage. We kind of try to create the best possible initial advantage in a possession. So there aren't a lot of possessions where the final good shot comes after a lot of guys have kind of like drove and kicked, right? And that means that there aren't a lot of times where we catch the defense off guard like 4 different times on the same possession. It's trying to capitalize on the one time that you can catch the defense off guard. And I think that has the Lakers were able to defend well because they were prepared to counter that game plan, right? Yeah, so I think that game was a little bit different than most of the losses, but it reminded me of like very early season Nuggets. In a way I wasn't expecting because I thought they at least weren't that team anymore.
What did you see from the game, Mike?
First off, Grace, you just give the most thoughtful damned answers. I just love that. Thank you. I felt like it was different on the different ends of the floor. I felt like on the defensive end, no, that feels like the Nuggets that we've seen an awful lot this year. That did not feel different. On the other end, it wasn't just the Lakers' offensive game plan. We just didn't feel as engaged last night, and that wasn't just Joker, and it wasn't just starting out 0 for whatever. It just didn't feel like we ever really got that end of the court rolling. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of what Grace had just talked about, in terms of looking for that first opportune shot, but we were missing so many of those uncharacteristically that it was just weird on the offensive end of the floor. And I don't know how much of that was the Lakers, how much of that was us. It is a bit of a surprise that we weren't game planning to take over the paint with AD gone and them just strapped for anybody big, that we didn't decide to just go rule that end of the floor. Just a strange night all around that way. For sure.
Can I just respond to that last point real
Absolutely.
quick?
Yeah.
I think they may have overcompensated a bit in that sense, right?
That's
They're
fair.
like 81, we're attacked, and they got kind of blinders about attacking the paint like very directly, like not trying to do it indirectly. And I think they would have probably had a lot more success
I think that's right.
that way. But yeah, they were like, no, like we're definitely gonna like a charging bull, and the Lakers were prepared for that at least. And they were selling out because they were like, we don't have any backline defense, so we're just everybody help at the rim all the time, always.
That's right.
So for years, my assessment of who is the best player in the league was a coin flip between Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic. That's just me, with Nikola having the edge in the efficiency battle. But one thing Luka has over Joker is the fact that he doesn't have to wait for a teammate to pass him the ball in a good spot on the court. He can just force the issue on every possession. I'm not saying that's what happened last night, but it is easier to force the ball out of Nikola's hands than out of Luka's hands. Is Jamal a good enough on-ball player against elite defensive teams to compensate for this and still hand the ball to Joker on time and in a good spot? Let's start with Mike this time.
Not so far this year. I sure think he can be. He has not necessarily shown that this year, but I also don't think that we're relying on Jamal as much this season to get the ball up the floor. There's been a large group of people who've been doing that all year this year, and I think that's, if we intend to continue with that game plan, I believe that that's partly Russ's job, partly AG's job. I think we even need to find ways to have Joker bringing the ball up a little more than we typically have during this part of the year.
The reason why I ask you this at this moment in time is because we've been relying on Russ a lot this season. He's been great as a point guard next to Joker. But when a team is ignoring Russ so hard as the Lakers did last night, I think we need to figure out some other stuff and try to see if you can put your best shooting lineup out there and still don't lose the edge on playmaking side.
I don't disagree. I think that's right. I just don't know that. I don't think you can lay that all on Jamal's shoulders. That's not proven to necessarily be our best way to get that ball into Joker half the time.
What do you think, Grace?
I think that Jamal has actually taken I want to say a step back, but that's not quite right. He was better at getting the ball to Jokic last season than he is this season, but he's better at getting the ball to others this season than he was last season. That's for sure. I don't actually know why he's gotten worse at. He was so crafty and creative in ways that he got the ball to Jokic, like in actions and kind of randomly last season. It was a talking point throughout the year. This year it's been notably bad, and I don't quite know why that is. It's not. There are definitely times where he's like hunting his own shot, and that's like one thing. But there are other times where he's trying to find the angle. You can see that, but he's just not able to get it there. And I do think that partially he's kind of suffering from the comparison to Russell Westbrook, who has been really good and like daring in the types of passes that he makes Jokic, for better or worse. And we saw a lot of the worst last night. But yeah, so the answer is like what he's doing right now is not good enough. I think if he were back to as good as he was at it last year, like we'd be fine because we'd have him, we'd have Russ with, with all the mistakes, that come with that. But I also think that the entry passing from Christian needs a lot of work because he is both tentative and inaccurate. So you're like, okay, I understand the tentativeness there now. But he's not he'll like hold on to the ball too long is the other part of the problem sometimes. There was actually this play in the Hornets game the other night where he gets the rebound, he's bringing the ball up in transition, and Russ is like wide open on the wing because they're ignoring Russ, and they've basically got Russ's guy like fronting Joker, and then Joker's guy is sandwiching him, and Christian still tries to make the entry pass to Jokic. He had a little bit of space there, but it was just a bad pass. It results in a turnover. And I think that's it's clear that they're trying to do like initiation by committee a bit more this season, even with both Jamal and Russ there. Everybody else, like Mike mentioned, with AG, and I think I've noticed it a lot with Christian because I'm closely monitoring his development, how important it is for this season. But yeah, right now it's definitely a problem. And I think part of it it's not just the getting the ball to Jokic, because right now everybody's trying to get him the ball and completely ignoring wide open driving lanes to the rim that they have for themselves. But these are not players that are comfortable taking advantage of those opportunities as slashers, which is really unfortunate because you'd think with the athletic tools that these guys have that they'd be better at least at that. I actually think that probably MPJ has done the best job of balancing those two when he has those opportunities, obviously with the exception of, the last couple of games, but this season. But he's not put in that position a lot, and kind of understandably so. And maybe one of the reasons that it's so easy for him is just that he's so tall and he's like willing to kind of lob the ball in to make entry passes that other guys can't. Yeah, so I don't have a coherent thought there, but those are my thoughts on entry passes.
Okay, let's start being a bit more optimistic on the other side of this break, but don't miss it. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. So I said I'm going to be optimistic in this part, but I'm going to start with a dark thought. The Nuggets lost 20 games before winning 40, so that benchmark for a championship run is now out of the window. Do you see a path for the Nuggets to become much better by the end of this season? Considering Jamal is playing really well right now, at least on the offensive side of the ball, and Joker is Joker. Where do you see the biggest gaps the Nuggets can fill in and become a much better team than what we're seeing right now?
If I could go first, I think this has really been my whole thing this season, is the defense. At this point in the season, I think it's more fair to say, look, like, we know that we don't have certain personnel to be able to be good defensively in certain areas, but effort-wise, they definitely have enough to be closer to 12th than 20th, which is where they're at right now. And at this point in the season, you need to be able to show that you even have that gear in you, because, like you said, Miroslav, this is the team that they have right now. And I do think, now look, last night was ugly offensively and they got blown out, right? And they might have lost that game anyway. But one of the things I've been really worried about this season is whether they can win a defensive game. Can you win a rock fight, right? Because even in the most favorable matchups in the playoffs, you're going to encounter a game where you can't put up 120 offensive rating, and you need to hold the other guys down. And I would like to see them show that they can at least do that. Right? I think they've only won, I think it's 3 games. No, not in this stretch. I think 6 games this whole season where they score less than 115 points, which is not good. Now, on the flip side, there aren't that many games where they've scored less than 115 points, and most of them came earlier in the season, right? During that really tough stretch, in terms of how the team was playing. But yeah, that would be where I would start, is like, can this team show that they can get connected long enough to execute a game plan and really hold a good team down offensively?
I could not agree with that more, because they just need to defend if they want to have a chance in playoffs. We know their offense is probably good enough. I've seen, and I have to give a shout out to my friend Ray Martinelli. He said today on Twitter that the Nuggets' best chance is to be completely unstoppable on offense, and this is the way they're going to win a championship. And I have to disagree with that, because nobody is completely unstoppable in the playoffs. You're always going to get some games where you're going to play through the mud. Now, the 2023 team was better than their competition, so they've been able to overcome those muddy games and still win those series. The competition right now is just much harder than what it was 2 years ago, in my opinion. Mike, do the Nuggets have enough defensive personnel to create a serious playoff defense?
Yes, if a few folks can come back to their potential. I think rock fight's the right word, and that happens invariably in the playoffs. I think there were 3 or 4 of those games out of the 16 wins that they had, including Game 5.
It was often Game 2s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so everybody has figured one another out. They start tightening down on both ends of the court. Christian does not look like himself defensively this year. And I think a lot of that has to do with how much he's turned up his offense and how much is being asked of him offensively. but he doesn't look like he did 2 years ago defensively. Aaron, maybe coming back from injury or no, does not look like himself 2 years ago, does not look like that guy. And those are 2 of 3 guys that I would think of out of that series, with KCP on that list as well. Even some Bruce in there, who were able to fly around enough to cover up for some of how we do what we do on defense. Aaron is not flying around right at the moment. That is actually Peyton, to Grace's point earlier, who's been really kind of that cover up the edges of the mistakes kind of guy, blur those lines defensively. Can he get back to full health by the time we hit the playoffs? That will be a big help, if that's possible, if that's true. Julian, I actually thought was taking some big steps forward defensively until these last few games, and I'm kind of swallowing my whistle on that one now. I'm never the firmest believer in Jamal's defense, so I hate the answer to this question, Miro, but maybe. If you guys need to heal up and play like they have before.
I have to ask you, Mike, because you're such a great writer. You've
Thanks.
seen all those 10 seasons of Malone, Joker tenure on the Nuggets. If you would have to use only one word to describe this season, which word would you use?
Tempestuous, chaotic, Richter, like Richter scale. It's been it really has been so up and down.
Grace, you seem to have an idea for a word.
I was gonna say morass.
Okay.
It's been sticky. It's been touch and go, you know. It's been heavier than I expected, just in terms of, I thought that Ryan Blackburn had a really great article on this last month about how so many different people on the players on the team and members of the organization are facing a really heavy pressure based on the outcome of this season, and it's all just very heavy.
The word I would use, and I'm cheating, it's 2 words. It's soft purgatory. and here's why. So people will often say Calvin Booth is wasting Joker's prime. He's not going all in. I have to say something. He is going all in. He spent all of his picks. He has no picks to trade. He already did trade his picks. And yeah, of course, there are some pick swaps, whatever. But he just didn't do what maybe I wanted him to do. Like maybe I wanted him to be more aggressive on the trade market before this trade deadline, because this time around he really didn't have anything to operate with. So I feel like it's a soft purgatory. They might come out of it stronger than they were before it. I'm not sure of it, but yeah, that's how I see it.
Grace had mentioned Cal's news conference after the lack of trades, and what I wanted to hear from him there in some way, shape, or form was, I tied my own hands here, and I didn't, and I think there's some things there that could have been recognized on his part, for sure.
Right. It was he basically said it, but in the passive voice, like somehow, like we're all trying to find the guy who did this.
Who knew
we don't have assets to do anything with.
Well,
and we've been, what was the phrase that he used about how they'd been going to the bank? In that they were, spent, they kept trying to, I guess, get credit, and now the bill has come due this season. Actually, on that note, Miroslav, I do think that one of the things that's been hanging over this season, despite, again, everything I said about the pressure that so many on the team and in the organization are facing, is the season's kind of been hanging on the edge of, like, are we contending this year or is this a gap year? Right?
Second
And
gap year, yeah.
the second gap year, right? And I think that like it undoubtedly that's affected how Jokic and the other players have approached this season, have approached defense this season, have approached, I think it was Benny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette who asked this in one of the post-game press conferences around the deadline, where he asked Jokic if they had enough to, quote, accomplish their goals this season. Jokic just said yes. And I'm like, I would have liked the follow-up of what are the goals this season, right? He had that quote after the game last night about how, maybe they tricked themselves with the winning streak of, beating, like, taking care of business against bad teams. And then obviously getting their tails kicked by the Lakers last night. So I can't imagine that it feels good for the players to kind of be on this roller coaster about, like, what they're working towards, even though, like, it really is up to them what that goal is, right? It's all about what their potential is in terms of coming together as a team and what they can put out on the court.
I wanted to do a full Western Conference power ranking, but we don't have enough time for it. I'm just going to ask you guys, who are the teams, or a single team, I don't know, who you hope the Nuggets will not face in the playoffs? Who do you hope some other team will kick out of the playoff bracket and make Nuggets' life easier? Let's start with Mike.
Well, that was unfair to Grace, but let's go ahead and say that who would want to face Oklahoma City coming up out of our? I would be thrilled to see us in the second slot and see them have a similar outcome to last year. Be very excited for that.
Just OKC then.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were doing this one at a time, but that would be my first answer. Yes, sir.
At this point, it's OKC and the Wolves, I think. Minnesota's not a good offense, but they always give us trouble because of the particular weaknesses that our defense had and has, that it's even worse now. In particular, I mean, after them, everyone is the same to me, basically. Well, unless I guess the Mavs with AD are, like, tougher defensively, but offensively, like, I'm more worried about our defense than our offense right now in a playoff setting.
Is AD their best player?
Healthy, maybe.
I mean, I'm asking this because of the level of success the teams where he was the best player on has had during his career.
I think that's fair, and with the idea of those rock fights we were talking about, I might worry about Houston and even Jimmy's new destination in Golden State as well. They both stand a puncher's chance of coming in and making things real hard for us.
Yeah, they're going to be better offensively now, so I'd probably add them into that mix. OKC, I'm actually, of all the teams in the West, I'm least worried about defending their offense, but they're so good at what they do. I obviously would rather, like, not face them or face them later.
They should have just signed Alex Avramovic from the free agents to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Come on, guys! He was right there. The reason why I'm less optimistic this season compared to last season is because there are fewer teams I feel great about. in the Western Conference bracket. Like there are fewer teams. I'm gonna just say, of course. Like there's no way they can beat us. Unfortunately, the Suns are no longer in the playoff contention. So yeah, that's one fewer team to feel great about. But I'm just poking fun at them, guys. Do you want to plug something before we leave?
We'll be doing a new episode of What's in Game this week after quite the hiatus while I was on vacation. So definitely look out for that on our YouTube channel. Hopefully we'll have some more positive things to talk about with the team and kind of what the rest of the season means.
Yeah, and check out also Four Corners, where Grace and Will both were guests in the last episode. I would like to recommend that show as well. Mike?
Just check out the weekend stuff when you have a chance to come through. But no, the DNVR guys have been doing such a killer job this season with covering the team and all. It's amazing to me more. I think the plug that Grace gave earlier about the Joker book, Mike Singer's book, I just wrapped that up, and not a plug for me, but my God, what a nice piece of work. And if you want to understand what is making that dude tick, that is required reading, basically. So huge fan. Kudos, Mike. Good stuff.
Shout out, Mike. All right. Yeah. That is all I've prepared for you this week, my dear listener. And please, with the cherry on top, take the word prepared very loosely. I just let these two people talk smart about the Nuggets, and I pretend to be a host. Be well, be safe, be kind to everybody. Call your mom, and until next week, Kentavious Caldwell Pope.